So what I want to do is to suggest to you that if we take some strength from our past, we can get past our present into a better future. If you talk to people around the country at this time, and I've been all over the country, I've been in 18 or 20 states, and you'd be surprised. I hear the same questions, I hear the same angst, I hear the same frustration, the same anger. Believe it or not, in red Nebraska, in Tallahassee and Tampa and Sarasota, Florida, in New Hampshire, in California, in Seattle, in Tacoma, in Boulder, Colorado. I spoke not long ago to the top 0.1%. A friend of mine from college invited me to go back and to talk at the Thunderbird Country Club in Palm Springs, California. Do you know who goes to Palm Springs, California? Yeah, it's not the 1%, it's the 0.1%, or maybe the 0.01%, okay? So I'm thinking, what is going to happen with this audience? Are they going to throw rocks at me, or tomatoes, or eggs, or what is it? And when I got done giving my talk, different talk that I'm giving today, but no, I laid it out. I laid out how the powers that be, Wall Street, corporate America, the financial elite captured power in what I call a revolt of the bosses back in the 1970s in response to a memo written by Lewis Powell that said, you got to go take over power in Washington, and they did. And so I laid it all out. I laid out the inequality. If you look at what happened from 45 to 70, the growth in the productivity of the American workforce nearly doubled. It went up 97%. And if you look what happened to the median hourly wages and benefits of an average worker, it went up 95%. 97%, 95%. For that 3 decades, the growth, the muscle, the efficiency, the productivity of the American workforce and the American economy got shared with people in the middle. Yes. Right. All 5 quintiles. 20% of the bottom, 20% of the top, they all moved up together in terms of their income. Okay, if you look at the period since then, the productivity of the American workforce has gone up 80%, and the median hourly wages and benefits of the average worker has gone up 6%. If you look at the last 4 or 5 years, corporate profits have been going up about 20% a year. And the average household income of the median household in the country has gone down since 1999. We're going in the opposite direction. You can see the productivity rising like that, and you can see the incomes of average people going up and leveling off. Something happened. What happened was a change in power. We went from citizen power with the movements that I was talking about to the capture of power by basically corporations, corporate lobbyists, the financial elite, and Wall Street in a very organized way. And by the way, we have a political system that is broken. We have got to fix it. The people who are in charge in Washington are actually quite comfortable with the way the system is. Democrats as well as Republicans. They play the big money game. And most of them, not all of them, most of them don't know any other game to play. The only people who can persuade them to play a different game is we the people. We can no longer wait for them to do it. So I'm sitting there listening to Andy's story, which I'd never heard before. And my response is, so why isn't there a referendum item put on the ballot in Washington State in 2016 that has exactly the same provisions that he had in that bill? It would pass overwhelmingly. If you look at the polls around the country, and I'm sure it's true in Washington State, you're talking about 75, 80% of the public is saying the political system is broken. Money has got too much control. Dark money is the worst part of the problem. We need to disclose it. And by the way, Supreme Court, which has said all kinds of things about what you can't do in politics to try to limit the amount of money, has said, please, public disclosure is constitutional. Anthony Kennedy, writing the decision in the Citizens United case, said open air is the disinfectant to fix corruption in the American system. The Supreme Court is inviting the public. Justice Kennedy is inviting the public to do that. And if this guy is going to be blocked by the lobbyists, We, the people, have to show the lobbyists that won't stop. Now, I'm sure Andy is going to go back there and fight for it, and he may make it or may not. But the question is whether or not we as people, as people concerned here with fixing democracy first, will actually back him up and join forces and demonstrate to politicians of both parties and demonstrate to people on both sides of the Cascades, and by the way, to other states as well, that we are not going to take no for an answer. We're not going to take lobbying for an answer. Part of our problem as a people is that we have, and thank God for this group because you aren't there, but we as a people have lost faith in our ability to influence politicians. Okay? Powerlessness corrupts democracy at the core. If we believe we are powerless, we are. We just disenfranchised ourselves. So we have to believe in our power. We have to believe in our power. And the great thing, I feel very fortunate to be in the state because I go in other states, but believe you, I said these same kinds of things in Nebraska to an audience of 1,000 people on a Tuesday night on a snowy evening who showed up for a guy who wrote a book called Who Stole the American Dream. When I went into Lincoln, Nebraska, I thought maybe there were going to be 30 or 40 people in the audience. There were 1,000 people. And we got into a question period afterwards. And the lights were a lot brighter there than they are here, and I could barely see the audience, but I could see there were maybe 10 or 15 hands up around this audience asking questions. When we got done, 45 minutes later, there were 50 hands in the air. People wanted to talk about how we get American democracy back. So there are now 16 states in the country that have said to Congress, we want you to introduce a constitutional amendment to roll back Citizens United and restore the power of Congress and state legislatures. Right here in this room tonight with Jay Heyman and a bunch of people in Fix Democracy First, you're starting to circulate petitions in this state to put it on the ballot in 2016. To make Washington State the 17th state. I had just come 2 months ago from New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, you know what they have? They have town meetings, okay? And they have town petitions. 60 New Hampshire towns have individually passed around petitions for a constitutional amendment, and they have passed it in 60 different towns. They're now putting the pressure on the New Hampshire legislature. In Colorado, in the 2012 election, Colorado's a purple state. Blue is not red, it's purple. But it can be a tough state, it can be a tough place to go. And people got organized and they decided we're going to put it on a referendum on the ballot in the 2012 election. Do you know that in Colorado in 2012, a referendum calling for a constitutional amendment and instructing Colorado's congressional delegation to back, support, and introduce a resolution in Congress passed by 74%. It passed in every single county in the state, red or blue. So give up the idea that this is impossible. The public, Republican, Independent, and Democrat, is way ahead of the office holders. We can do it, and we're not going to get there, by the way, if we don't reach across party lines and embrace everybody. I know it feels good to be with the people that you're used to dealing with, and it feels good to get involved in a partisan campaign. But the issues we're talking about are saving the soul of our country. You heard the president the other morning, talking at that terrible funeral, that wonderful funeral, and terrible funeral in Charleston. And he was talking about God's grace. He was talking about saving the soul of the country. And he was talking about guns, and he was talking about racial relations and so forth. But we're talking about the soul of the country in terms of the fairness of the economy. We're talking about the soul of the country in terms of the openness, fairness, transparency of our elections and our democracy.